So, fellow Kryptonians out there, we've done a 10 things I want to see in the Batman Part 2 before. We've done 10 projects that I want to see come to the DCU. But how about 10 things that I want to see in Superman Legacy? So we're going to go through all 10 things that I want to see, not necessarily in order. This isn't like a top 10 ranked. These are just 10 things that I would like to see tackled in the movie in terms of characters, perhaps certain approaches to certain things in the movie. I keep saying things, but I kind of don't want to give it away right now. So what I also want from you guys is to let me know 10 things that you would like to see in Superman Legacy. Maybe there's something that you've thought of that I haven't, and I would really want to see myself. And maybe there's something in my list that you guys are like, okay, actually I want to see that as well, or just expand on it. Also, let me know if you completely disagree with one of the things that I have. But without any further ado, what is the first one in this list? It is the Kents. They may be like, well, isn't that obvious? Wouldn't you like to see Martha Kent? But not only Martha Kent, I'm talking Jonathan Kent as well. That's a thing that I feel like in a lot of Superman media, by the time Clark becomes Superman and where he's active, Jonathan Kent might have unfortunately passed away. But I feel like seeing not only Martha Kent, but also Jonathan Kent as that duo present in the movie, helping guide Clark, even if he just visits them at some point in the movie. Perhaps they come to Metropolis, maybe they meet Lois. I don't know, but I feel like having that guiding parental figures on top of Jor-El, you know, I don't know what we're going to get of Jor-El, if at all, but you have to think we might be. There's rumors right now out there that Kurt Russell could be Jor-El or Jonathan Kent. I'm kind of going off topic right now, but I think this would just be such a nice addition to the movie as opposed to just having one of them in the picture. Because Jonathan Kent, whether it's, you know, in live action when he saw Smallville, and eventually I think around season 5 was it, he had the heart attack. Man of Steel, he kind of got swept up by a twister, and other media, even in the comic books, he kind of might die by the time Clark, you know, graduates. And I'm not saying at the same time that this shouldn't eventually happen in the DCU. Who knows? Maybe in the movie I still wouldn't like that, because my main thing is that I would like them to be a part of Clark's life, helping him navigate the difficulties of being Superman. I know he's already Superman in this movie, and we still don't quite know how long he's been Superman, but them not necessarily coaching him, but always being there for their adoptive son in times of hardship, or even if he wants to tell them about this new girl that he's dating, Lois Lane. I feel like there's a lot of wholesome material that they can chuck in there. And yeah, at some point, if they want to add in a tragedy with Papa Kent and Martha Kent in the DCU, they can do that. I feel like there's so much that they can do there throughout Superman's journey in the DCU. Even if you want to kind of allude to the past of Superman, they can have like a conversation where it's like, hey, you know, that time when you told me that you were handling this, and what did I say to you, son? I don't know, but you can kind of go off in a million different directions with this. For me, next up at number 2, I would like Superman to be at around year 3. Not much earlier if they are going to go earlier, and not too much later if he is going to be past year 3. So I'm not going to put like a firm stamp on this one because I am flexible, but I definitely have a preference in terms of where he should be at in his Superman career. Now, James Gunn has said that this Superman is in his earlier years at the Daily Planet, but at the same time, this isn't an origin story. It's not a workplace origin story, so he's been at the Daily Planet for some time. And this is why I think year 3 is kind of like a decent starting point for where we're picking up in the DCU. Now, the thing is about Superman compared to Batman, let's say, is that in the source material, he often starts, well, I'm not saying Batman doesn't start in his 20s, because he does, but Superman can often start even early 20s compared to Batman. But if quite literally David Corenswet Superman started at, let's say, 22, 23, early 20s. Since James Gunn has said that David Corenswet Superman will be David Corenswet's age, and since they're looking to start filming spring next year, well, he's going to be 31 years old. And I think he's 31 right now, so he's still going to be 31. So yeah, if he started off early 20s, that means he'd be like Superman freaking year 8, year 9, year 10. And I don't think they're going to do that. So I know people like to joke, oh, you know, how are you going to bring this background to Matt Reeves? Reeves, but seriously, the way Matt Reeves did it was quite a good template of tackling bringing yet the same character back on screen, but in a refreshing way. So with Robert Pattinson's Batman, he was in year 2, around 1 year, 6 months in. And I'm not saying James Gunn should copy and paste that, but perhaps Superman is in year 3, so like 2 years, 8 months in, or he's in year 4, having been Superman for like 3 years and 4 months, which is still quite a hefty amount of time going around with your red cape, saving people, possibly going up against metahumans. So the way I can kind of envision David Corenswet Superman is that maybe he was getting experience in his early 20s, training at the Fortress after leaving Smallville, perhaps a bit of a red-blue blur situation that people wrote about in newspapers, but then he maybe goes into Superman mode at around 29 or 28, whatever, which would roughly put him at year 3 in the movie. But again, I think for me, I would cap it off at around year 5. So he can be a little bit younger than like 28, 29 as of when he first started. But I do feel like if you're going past the 5-year mark for David Corenswet Superman and where we pick up with the story, if you go too much beyond that, like year 7, year 8, then I do feel like we could have missed out on like a massive chunk of what this Superman has been up against, what formed him to be Superman. And again, I know that sounds like I'm kind of describing an origin story there. I get it, but I don't want an origin. Let me stress that. But I do think there's a big difference of, okay, year 3, year 4, maybe year 5. You're still in like the foundation younger years of him at the Daily Planet and his experience as Superman. But year 7, year 8, it's like, okay, well now we've taken quite big leaps. And I do feel like that is a seasoned Superman by that point. So I do have an inkling that we are going to be around the year 3 mark or year 4 mark, but it's still in the infancy. He's still becoming, whereas year 7, God knows what he would have been up against by then. So let me know if you agree. All right, so number 3 in this video. Oh, I don't know how people are going to feel about this one. Number 3 for me surrounds Lois and Clark, and I've written down on my bullet point, Lois doesn't know Clark is Superman, and to kind of mix it in all in one, because this somewhat encapsulates them both, and they're dating. So, like, not a full-on relationship by the time we pick up in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Clark has been at the Daily Planet for some time, as James Gunn says. He's at his younger years, so he could have been working there for, again, going over the point that we just went over in number 2, for 3 years and know Lois Lane very, very well. It's just maybe around what I'm kind of wanting to see in the movie is that they've got to the point in where they kind of want to take the next step. And let's say they are dating or in the early stages of dating. This would mean they're kind of still in that honeymoon phase. Perhaps they've only been seeing each other for 3 months. I feel tackling Lois and Clark this way at the start of an 8 to 10 year plan of the DCU. So these characters are intended, it's another thing if we're going to get there, but they're intended to have arcs that flesh out that long. And this way, you don't pick up, as per what we went over with number 2, with like an origin, but something that still refers to an origin. So they know each other, but they're not quite where they are, where we kind of know them to be in the comics. You have that infatuation and chemistry, and they're still in the giddy early days of Lois Lane and Clark Kent, with the biggest news of Clark revealing himself to Lois Lane as Superman yet to come, and how they go from there. Maybe that happens in the first movie. You'd have to think that if Lois Lane doesn't know Clark Kent is Superman at the point of us beginning to watch the movie, that she would probably find out in the first movie. I don't think Gunn would delay that for later down the line. I feel like audiences will really enjoy it, because one thing we're gathering is that this universe won't really have origin after origin after origin. Clearly, the brave and the bold of Batman, he's already got a Bat family there. We're not going to day 1 with other characters as well. It's probably going to be a similar thing, albeit, as I've said before, you might get some origins with like Booster Gold. He probably travels back in time in the first episode for the Max series, and that's where we have origins for characters of whom the general audience isn't so familiar with, but a way to kind of keep it so fresh but not too far in, and where like Lois and Clark already married in the first movie, is just have them dating. I feel like that really starts off a solid foundation point for both characters. Again, for me, it's the chemistry. It's the little exciting moments of where we don't need to see the origins of Superman again in the movie, putting on the suit for the first time, taking his first flight. He's already been doing that for like 2 or 3 years, but he's still dating Lois, and she still needs to find out that Clark is Superman. Or, you know, one thing I really like about this, if there are things, and I don't know if they're going to do this, like Lois Lane interviewing the Superman, she's not in love with him. She's in love with Clark Kent. They did that really well in flashbacks in Superman and Lois, and I would love for them to not copy and paste that, but mirror a similar thing, and where Lois does have a relationship with Superman on the professional side, but the man she's falling in love with is the man in the same office as her, Clark Kent. And I think there is a lot of potential for romance here, as well as obviously the tough, spirited reporter side of the movie with Lois and Clark, Jimmy and Perry. But let me know if you disagree. Would you just like Lois and Clark to already be in a relationship for like 3 years at this point? So number 4, and I need to kind of get on with this because we're already on my screen quite a few minutes into this video and I'm already talking and wasting more time right now. So what is number 4? Okay, this one's gonna maybe make people say quite a few things. The suit. I put as a bullet point here, make a bold change. The kind of bold change that I'm thinking of might not be what you're thinking of. And for me, that's going with a more classic symbol. Introduce the red and yellow symbol a little bit later on with upgrades. I mean, after all, we're going to have the Superman for 10 years, ideally, if it makes it that far. And even though technically red and yellow was there, you know, at the beginning with Action Comics, I think it would indeed be pretty damn awesome to have a notable difference with the 1940 black and red symbol or the 1941 Max Fleischer symbol. I know, this is the thing, I know some people, because I think, to be honest, Superman's suit debates are way more debated than a Batman suit. I think it's because with Batman, you normally have, obviously there's lots of different configurations of looks for the suit there. But with Superman, it's a bit more blocky. You have just a few features. The cape, the symbol, maybe a symbol on the cape, and trunks or no trunks. Maybe you disagree with that. But Superman, I think it's way more heated of a debate. But going back to the symbol here, I know people have disagreed with me before in terms of the black and red symbol. But I think, for example, Superman and Lois did a really good example of this, showing an earlier suit. I would like to think that maybe people will be more open to a change like that, because I think it can really differentiate this Superman from other modern Supermans we've seen, like with Henry Cavill's. He started off with the red and yellow symbol, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that if you've got a new actor, David Corenswet, you've got a new DCU with a whole new continuity to that Superman, one thing you can do, especially since if the universe is successful and goes on for multiple years, like an Iron Man 1 suit, 2, 3, etc., is you're going to get upgrades there. So to start off with a way that can really distinguish this Superman, showing that symbolic bold change to the general audience too, with a black and red symbol, it's kind of like, oh wait, this isn't Henry Cavill. Oh wait, this symbol is different. What gives with that? I kind of dig it. But I do also know that some other people's bold change, as per my main point here with number 4, is that, oh no, I want a normal symbol, so like a red and yellow, but my bold change would be give him trunks. That will put in the general audience's minds that this David Corenswet Superman is not only different because it's a different actor, but hey, look, he's got trunks. Now, for me, I wouldn't hate it. Let me put it that way. I wouldn't hate it. Let me get that into your heads. If James Gunn gave him trunks, I wouldn't be against it, okay? But my preference is no trunks. Just give him a nice belt or whatever, I don't know, and give him a classical symbol with the black and red. I know plenty of you will be like, what, Boba? No, how dare you? But again, this is where I think we're going to get a few people talking. So let me know if you agree. Let me know if you disagree. So number 5, the movie's title, Superman Legacy. What does it mean exactly? And we won't really truly know until the movie comes out. I know some people are like, Superman's legacy means that he's got to have kids with Lois Lane in the film and Jonathan Kent's got to... No, this, I'm telling you now, it's not going to be Superman's literal legacy there with in terms of kids. I want Superman Legacy to mean that, given what we've discussed over and over again in this video with him obviously still being in his formative years, but not necessarily an origin, in that the world still looks at him in a certain way. And I've talked about this reverse Kingdom Come situation, in where James Gunn, in the early days of coming on in the DCU, even before advertising and teasing so much Superman stuff, a lot of it was Kingdom Come. A lot of Kingdom Come teasers there. So I think, and you may have heard me say this before, that Superman Legacy will quite literally mean the legacy that Superman establishes in the superhero world. Key phrases of what James Gunn has said is that superheroes exist and have existed in this DCU. We're hitting the ground and the universe running, quite literally, with characters having already existed. It's just what could have been going unchecked since the JSA, since there might not be even a fully established Justice League right now. Who knows? That's another debated point. Is that in a reverse Kingdom Come situation, I mean, imagine a world where, even in today's world, where you can have powers. Some people will use that for good, and some people will use it for villainy, but there will be a lot of anti-heroes out there. People with minds, kind of like what a lot of people say with the Authority, comparing it to the boys. I guess, on the bottom line, their intentions are kind of good, but they don't play by the rule book. They don't do things by the book. And Kingdom Come has that similar storyline in where Superman comes out of retirement to put people in check, because it's quite literally insane with the amount of heroes out there. So I don't think James Gunn is going to quite literally rip that from the comics, and where you will see like a city like Metropolis full of like people flying around just wanting to be wannabe heroes and doing things a bit too harshly or whatever. But I do want the title to mean something, and this is like the focal point of what I wanted to tackle, is that Superman's been known to the world, known to Metropolis, but through whatever he accomplishes in this movie, not only does the public look at him as this kind of symbol of hope, but also the metahuman compatriots, right? They may have a completely different way of tackling whatever the threat could be in this movie, and Clark is like, look, I think we should do it this way. Now, on paper, the way I'm maybe saying it right now may sound fairly boring, I guess, but I do think somewhere along the way I am kind of going down the direction of what Superman Legacy actually means, why James Gunn titled it Superman Legacy. But let me know if you, again, agree or disagree there, if you have different ideas for what you want James Gunn's title of Superman Legacy to be. Maybe it's in a vastly different direction to what I said, but I do think that would be a really cool way of setting up Superman to somewhat be in the role we know Superman to be in on Earth in the DC universe. So up next for number 6, we've had a few other characters cast in Superman Legacy, such as Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, then we have Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, and lastly, Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho, with possibly, I mean, who knows, more superheroes to come, because James Gunn said he has got his finger at the trigger ready for when, as soon as the actor strike ends, more castings to be announced. But they could honestly be like Lex Luthor, the Kents, I don't know. But this one, for number 6, surrounds Metamorpho. I think all while the other characters have been heroes for a certain amount of time. So like Hawkgirl's probably been out there for God knows how long. Same with Eddie Gathegi with his T-Spheres as Mr. Terrific. Guy Gardner's an older casting for Green Lantern, so they're going to maybe change a little bit of the backstory there, because some people have already got a bit heated about, wait, Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner shouldn't be this old. What's going on there? Is he going to be older than Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart? Maybe. I don't know. But as for Metamorpho, I don't think we should just assume that Metamorpho has been a hero for a long amount of time. I could be wrong here, and this is a theory I would like to see come true. Again, this isn't an expectation, so if this doesn't happen, I'm not going to be like, oh, it should have gone this way, I don't like it now. Some people do that too often with theories. But I do think that Anthony Carrigan's Metamorpho, it would be pretty cool if in this movie it was an origin for the character, in where he actually gets his powers. He does, by the end of the movie, go on to accept them and chill out and maybe go on to become a hero. And again, jumping to the end with that, Mr. Terrific can kind of take him in, and maybe they eventually go on to form the Terrifics. You guys who know should know. But before then, obviously getting the powers that Metamorpho has is absolutely crazy, and it would be true to the character as well, and how he wants to, in the source material, he wants to get rid of them initially, like completely get rid of them, and he's done a variety of things to try and accomplish that. So I think Anthony Carrigan's Rex Mason could get his powers from, I don't know, LexCorp or something like that, doing shady things, and he becomes a problem. And he's very powerful, very unpredictable with his powers. He's learning them as the movie goes on. He's not necessarily a bad guy, but again, like having powers in where he can can, forge even the element of kryptonite, that would be quite formidable for David Corenswet's Superman. So, again, I don't need this to happen, but I wanted to include it as a thing that I would like to see happen because it can not only give an origin to Rex Mason becoming Metamorpho, a little bit of an arc as a somewhat antagonist, but he's not really a bad guy, and to be also kept on in the DCU and how he can hone his powers and use those powers for good as a part of the Terrifics. I feel like there's a lot of potential there. I could be completely wrong, on the other hand, and he's already Metamorpho and he's been Metamorpho for like 8 years. I don't know, but I think this would be pretty cool. So for number 7, I'm not going to say an exact villain because honestly, I don't necessarily have a villain in terms of like, oh, I want Bizarro to be the villain of Superman Legacy. But my number 7 point is for the villain to be a good challenge for Superman, all while without really kind of necessarily being one of the major A-listers. So a lot of people are instantly like, I want Brainiac, I want this big character of whom, to be fair, I think Brainiac could be used as like a chapter 1 threat, to be honest, as not only a Superman villain to face. But you see what I mean? A lot of people like to go for the extreme heavy hitters right away. But with everything else that this movie could do, along with like the world building it can establish, I do feel like you could save characters or villains and threats like Brainiac for a little bit later and have Clark face up against something else in the movie. So I don't know if you want to go for like Metallo or even the recently rumored Lobo could be really cool. Maybe if, again, I know I keep putting it back to Lex Luthor, but maybe if Lobo was hired by Lex, Lobo can really somewhat stand toe to toe with Superman, especially early on. Again, I think that is so crucial to this movie and how he's not a veteran, but still, somewhat experienced having flown out there for a little while. But you could have other threats, which, I'm not saying Metallo is an easy threat, but there are other formidable things that you can put in here. So my main point here is not necessarily an insanely popular villain. I think that they can do a lot more, all while making a physical punchy threat in the movie at the same time to still provide that action entertainment. Now, on top of this, I would also like just a day in the life of Superman stuff. Perhaps even an intro to the movie or somewhere near the beginning, he's preventing a Toyman attack. This one's a bit of a tough one for me to crack, and I'm sure for anyone, like, who is James Gunn really going to choose to be the villain of Superman Legacy? And maybe, as I've tried to point out, it won't be as clear as that. There'll be threats. Maybe, Superman saves Metropolis or a few buildings from exploding from Toyman. But then there's this other threat with Metamorpho having been created and he doesn't know how to handle his powers. So there's multiple things kind of navigated as Lois and Clark try and do the reporter side story of who created Rex Mason's powers and, where does this really, and they track along the way and maybe it goes back to this secret lab as a part of LexCorp or something. Like, I can imagine a multifaceted problem for them to tackle that really highlights the Lois and Clark side, but the villain side is a bit more nuanced than just, hey, here's Brainiac and this is going to be an incredibly crazy freaking CGI fest blockbuster filled Hollywood superhero movie. I don't think it's going to start off like that right away. But let me know, once again, if you disagree and you think there should be an insane, popular Superman villain. I just don't think it's going to be as straightforward as this person's a villain, that's what Superman needs to solve and go up against, end of movie. Now, number 8. I think we're on number 8. Speaking of villains, Lex Luthor. But more specifically, the approach to him. Now, some of you might say, how do you know that Lex Luthor's got to be in it? He's got to be in it. I mean, this would be pretty funny if I'm wrong in several months' time, but he's got to be in it. But how should Lex be in Superman Legacy? So for me here, what I want to tackle is more of the build up to this character. I don't think, and again, I could be wrong, I always have to put that in as if it's like a legal thing I have to say, but I do think Lex should be in this movie, undoubtedly. I think the world building should be established there with his point of view, his perspective, but I don't think it should be as, like what BVS approach. Yeah, Jesse Eisenberg's Lex there, just kind of like God versus man, day versus night. I don't think it needs to be in your face like that. I'm not even saying that Superman even needs to have a scene with Lex Luthor face to face. But if there's some subtle, exciting build up there and eerily formidable, I think that would be a really smart way to go, because what I keep looking through the lenses of here is not just this movie. This is a 10-year plan. And I keep saying if we get there, because, this universe early on does need to prove itself so it can continue to build out its cinematic universe. But if you're looking at this not only just as one project, Superman Legacy, you'll start to realize that not everything needs to be ticked from start to finish, like beginning, middle, and end of every character in one movie. This can be fleshed out throughout time. And I think introducing a Lex who's very tactical, very maniacal, but very subtle about his villainy, I think that would be the way more interesting approach to go. So I want Lex in this movie, and I want him to be done in such a way that is really, really awesome. But it doesn't need to be in my face, and I'll understand that it doesn't need to be. If they want to pull a card of, oh, Lex was actually behind this part in the movie, that would be really cool. I wouldn't be against that. Just involve his character, make him something. I think this is the most powerful thing that they can do. Make him so captivating that the audience is dying to see more. Because, again, quality, not so much the quantity of scenes here. It's a 10-year cinematic universe. There's going to be more Superman appearances. We can broach our way to that villain that everyone wants to see over time. Now, you may have a completely different, somewhat view than me. You may want Lex Luthor to be right up there center stage. Let me know if you think that should be the case, but let me know if you somewhat agree with me in how they can build their way there. This is still in the younger years of Clark at the Daily Planet. I think that they can really cook up a really sweet long-term arc between Clark, Lois, and Lex over time versus just shoving that in our faces. But that doesn't mean that Lex can't have anything to do with what Clark runs into as trouble, whether that's the reporter side, the Daily Planet side, or even the Superman side. But we don't need him in the war suit like right away. Now, speaking of Clark Kent, the Daily Planet side, number 9 is the approach to Clark Kent. So for me, I do want a somewhat goofy Clark Kent. Now, I'm not talking quite Christopher Reeve or going like too over the top there, but again, to compare heroes, it's very useful. Tyler Hoechlin's Clark Kent from Superman and Lois, I think, is like a really good way of adapting Superman. Not only like the Superman side, but the Clark Kent side that is still true to the man who really tries to separate both parts of his identity. Now, if you've watched Superman and Lois, you'll know that Tyler Hoechlin's Clark Kent is, yeah, he's got like that fairly somewhat more modern, toned down approach to Clark at times, but there are just the like really nerdy moments, not even where Clark is trying to act over the top, cheesy, or goofy. It's just a part of who Clark is. But it's not so far to the point of where he's like properly hunching over his shoulders and pushing up his glasses. Don't think Corenswet's Clark should go crazy like that. But I really do think, if you know what I mean by Tyler Hoechlin's Clark Kent, that is a really good way of approaching it. Because I do think, and I'm not trying to like, pit them up against each other at all, but like Henry Cavill's Clark, from what I remember to his Clark, and granted we didn't really get a great peek into Daily Planet scenes or his reporter side, there wasn't really any cheese to him when we saw that. He was just essentially a reporter wearing glasses. I mean, if you think about it, granted he didn't act exactly like Superman, but it also didn't really feel like there was remotely any effort at all to really separate the identities other than quite literally glasses. And that's fair enough. That's the take that the DCEU went for. But with David Corenswet Superman, yeah, I can imagine that when he's Superman, there'll be a lot more of a Miss Lane, a lot more of an elegant type thing going on. But with Clark, more of a Tyler Hoechlin Superman, where he's still like not overdoing it, fairly based and, leveled out, but there's still like eye-rolly moments from Lois, like thinking he's such a goofball. And now lastly here, what I've bullet pointed number 10 is larger world building. Now this does indeed have something to do with other heroes. The first cinematic, like proper live action responsibility that any of these projects have to show the pure DCU with, in terms of like, hey, here's what Metropolis looks like. Here's what this aesthetic that nobody's ever seen before, as James Gunn claims, looks like in the DCU. That is Superman Legacy. So all while it has a lot of responsibility there, they shouldn't go too ham, because all while you will be making a Superman movie, it will feel further and further away of what a Superman movie should have been if you're so worried about setting up all the founding pillars of what your universe is supposed to be. And people are already worried about that, right? With other characters in there like Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Metamorpho, as James Gunn again describes them as, how can I, truly tell both sides of Superman's life, Clark Kent and Superman, without including his metahuman compatriots. And I do completely agree with that. I think this could be really cool. Like maybe they're going to fly up and sit on the side of a building and have lunch together. I don't know. So bottom line, all I want to say here is that I don't want so much stuff shoved in here because it can feel a bit fan servicey. But if there's any reference to other heroes like Batman and Wonder Woman, that would be pretty awesome. I say that again because you do have these other heroes in it. And from what I'm assuming right now, and I could be wrong, but I think Superman will probably already know of these other heroes like Mr. Terrific. I don't think they're going to be introed in the movie like BVS, like, hey, I'm Mr. Terrific. Hey, who's this? I thought she was with you. Wonder Woman appearing. I have to assume that Superman is familiar with Hawkgirl, maybe even Guy Gardner. Maybe one of them will be introduced, like Metamorpho. But regardless of that, I can't imagine there won't be any kind of commentary on the larger heroic universe of those out there operating as heroes as well. Like, what about Batman? I'm not saying he has to be in the movie, not at all. But maybe there can be a line. Because one thing we were talking about on a live stream yesterday from making this video is, to be fair, if Superman has been flying around the world for a few years, even if it's just 3 years, 4 years, depending on what year he's in this movie, Batman having operated out there for longer than 4 years, you can bet your ass on that if he has a Bat family, he most certainly knows who Superman is. Now, whether Superman knows who Batman is, these are answers we have yet to see. So I wonder if there is at least a Trinity set up. I'm not saying there's going to be a full-fledged Justice League, or maybe there could be, not necessarily fully fledged or remotely near Justice League Unlimited, but there could be heroes having worked with each other before, especially if James Gunn does decide to make Superman having been active wearing the cape for around 4 years by the time this movie even picks up, or even 3 years. Like, you can believe, especially if he's working with Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, potentially Metamorpho, that he might know of other heroes as well. Like, it's the more I think about that, the more believable it is. Maybe they can even reference heroes from a bygone era, again, such as the Justice Society of America. Maybe they even influence Clark to be a hero. Maybe he looks up to them and they actually have a part of the title that is Superman Legacy. Beforehand, they were a team who commanded this order and respect in the metahuman superhero world, and Superman wants to recreate that with other characters. All I'm on about here with the final bullet point again is larger world building. Don't go too ham, don't get too distracted from what we need to focus on in this movie, but that is one of the things I'm most excited for, because it's like getting a taste of, if you're excited for a game or any movie or whatever, a new franchise, a new universe, you don't truly know what it's like in this new thing. And this is our first taste of that. Given that this is a new DC universe, I think we need to expect that there's going to be kind of a lot presented to us, because it's a living, breathing DC universe in where heroes exist and have existed, and the continuity is different from the DCEU. So what is this world like? They're going to tell us that. They're going to show us that with, I don't know, even posters on the side of a bus in a city, maybe a hero flying in the background, other heroes having conversations with Superman, like Hawkgirl, maybe a reference to Hawkman, whatever the heck's going on there. Maybe Guy Gardner's going to talk about whatever Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart are up to, teasing the Lantern series. But let me know what larger world building you would like to see. Do you think there should be iconic characters referenced? I'd love to hear your thoughts on not only this, but all the previous 10 things that I want to see in Superman Legacy. Expand on what I had to say, but also let me know if there's something that I just completely missed that you think, Boba, why didn't you put this in? I would have thought maybe you would have liked to have seen that, and that would have been in your list of 10 things you would like to see. Because I got a feeling that one of you will point something out and I'll be like, damn, I really want to see, how did I miss talking about that? So hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. If you're still here at this point of the video, I would really appreciate a like. It really helps me out. Consider subscribing for more DC videos like this. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.